Well, welcome back to the Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd.
As business attorneys for healthcare practices, we meet a lot of interesting people and learn their amazing stories. This season's theme is the future of wellness, where longevity, advanced weight loss solutions, and anti-aging innovations collide. Get ready for insights from the people driving the evolution of the medical industry.
Well, Michael, I'm really excited to bring on the guest for today's show. He's going to come in and talk to us about wellness and the services of dermatology.
I'm excited too. We have a longtime friend and client joining us today. Before we start, got to need a little test for you again.
Okay.
You surprised me recently when we discussed looks maxing, and I did not think you would be familiar with it.
Yes. First, I'm excited that I know these things, and second, I'm sure I'm going to disappoint you with something that you're about to ask me.
I'm hoping so. Are you familiar with the term regular maxing?
Well, scratch what I just said about being so smart. I have no idea what regular maxing is. If it has anything to do with looks maxing, which is looking better, I don't think regular maxing has anything with looks. So it would be too obvious.
Yes. I read an article in Business Insider recently, and this is the latest Gen Z trend. The idea with regular maxing is a retrofit idea that we grew up with. They are looking to find a local bar, restaurant, or coffee shop where they spend all their time and everyone knows their name. They are exhausted from years of chasing exclusive reservations, trendy foods, and viral videos.
Well, Gen Z, welcome to my world. Apparently, I love regular maxing.
Right? Gen X love language. It's actually a bit refreshing to see the younger generation seek the human connection. Of course, Silicon Valley is looking to capitalize on this thirst for regular maxing. There's an app called Resy that focuses on loyalty rewards for restaurants in a handful of cities, including New York.
Yep, very familiar with Resi.
Do you have any haunts where people know your name, Brad?
Well, as you probably know, and audience members, I do like to have a cocktail sometimes, and there is a place called R&D Kitchen that is known as the West Office because I go there so often. I went there so much that not only did I know all the bartenders, but I got Valentine's Day cards from the bartenders and Christmas cards from the bartenders. And then there's a few other restaurants that we hit a lot also. What about you, Michael?
Well, first, audience, I can confirm because I was sitting with Brad there years ago when they handed him a Christmas card. But yeah, I have. And I've taken you here before. There's a place that I've gone to since I was a little kid called New York Sub here in the Park Cities in Dallas, and sadly they just closed a month ago.
I saw that.
But they had they've had two owners, and the prior owner, who I knew since my childhood, I'd ordered from him, and then into my adulthood, I was taking my kids there. And around the time that I got divorced in 2010, he had also recently gotten divorced, and he tried to take our relationship to a new level. Instead of just coming and talking to me when I was getting a sandwich, he was wanting me to go hit the town with him, and I never took him up on that because I think he lived a faster lifestyle than I did.
Yeah.
But yes, I do feel like I accomplished regular maxing with New York Sub.
Very well done. Well, I think we should bring on today's guest, Michael.
Okay. Our friend Paul Frank is joining us, who is a dermatologist in Manhattan. He was born and raised in Manhattan, went to New York Medical College, training in New York. He practiced with traditional dermatology and cosmetic dermatology. He has, I had to go check this since the last time, up to 275,000 followers on Instagram, and has street cred with my kids because he's certified. Our common bond is that he is passionate about education and training like us, and we bonded over this over the years. Paul, Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. I learned a new word today, the regular maxing. I thought it was more in pursuit of the dad bod. I thought that was going to be regular maxing.
That makes a lot of sense.
You know,
It does.
we have plenty of spots like that in New York too. You know, restaurants and bars that have been around for 40 plus years since I was a kid that breed themselves on regular customers and things like that. I'm glad that some people are doing that. I actually think it's a very important part of medicine as well. In a world today where a lot of big business has entered medicine and dentistry and healthcare, I think it's so important to create an environment, much like the old version of solo practitioners and family-owned businesses where different generations of doctors would join, where it gives the sense of regularity and continuity to patients. I always kind of looked at my practice like regular maxing for people as opposed to, you know, some other things where there's a different PA or nurse or doctor every time someone comes in. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Yeah.
you know their name. Yeah,
Well, that's awesome. And I guess, you know, since you grew up in New York, you know, Upper East Side most of your life, is there a place that you regular maxed in that you walk in and they're like, hey, it's Paul?
Well, if you're talking the Upper East Side, I grew up going to the Carlisle Hotel and Bemelman's Bar, which is a famous jazz club there.
Oh.
Carlisle is a staple of New York, and believe it or not, me and my dad still go there. He's 84, and we walk in, and the doormen that have been there for 40 years, and the bartenders who have been there, and the people. That's our regular. I mean, it's kind of high-end regular maxing going to the Carlisle Hotel. It's not like going to Cheers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, you know, there's some great spots like that in New York for the people who really want to be real New Yorkers.
That's amazing.
Very cool.
Well, so we've had you on before, but I'd love for the audience who doesn't know you, hasn't met you yet. Tell us a little bit more about you and PFrankMD.
So, you know, I'm a general dermatologist by trade. Over time, my expertise specialized in more dermatologic surgery, minimally invasive aesthetic surgery. And I was in solo practice for many, many years. Over the last decade, I've expanded the number of offices, the number of providers, that we really have more of a full spectrum dermatologic care, everything from insurance-based body checks and melanoma screenings and basal cell removal, all the way up to tumescent microliposuction and putting people under anesthesia for CO2 resurfacing. Really kind of pride myself on practicing the type of dermatology and aesthetic medicine that a lot of other providers don't do. We don't just like take syringes off the shelf and have one machine. We have about 40 different technologies in each of our offices, and we like to stay on the cutting edge. One of the big things, which I know is the topic of today, is really entering the field of longevity and wellness and health span, of which the terminology is very confusing. The word longevity, you know.
Well, that's, you know, going back to, as you said, you know, for our audience members, you know, we are really focused this entire season on the future of wellness. And you kind of are hitting it, Paul, which is like people hear the term wellness and they think longevity or weight loss or anti-aging. And so it ends up kind of, wellness kind of incorporates all this. And so tell us about the wellness services that you right now are offering in your practice.
Well, I've always felt, just theoretically, that wellness and beauty industry used to sit on opposite ends of the cafeteria, and they used to gossip about each other. One was considered like spiritual and frou-frou and, you know, didn't want to do anything. And the other one was considered really vain, and only white women that lunched did it. And now, mostly because of marketing and the opportunity for people to make money, everybody's getting along. Feel good, look good. But, you know, I wrote a book in 2020 called The Pro-Aging Playbook, which is really a spin on the bad terminology of anti-aging. We want to pro-age, and it really involves the fact that to look your best, you have to take care of yourself. It actually starts from the inside. It doesn't start from the outside. And over the years, I've had so many patients that, you know, they want to keep putting lipstick on the pig. They don't exercise. They don't watch their weight, they stress, they drink, they may smoke or do extracurricular intoxicants, and they think that Botox fillers and chemical peels and lasers are going to help them out. And I've always taught people that we have to work you from the inside. Now, what's great is that we finally not only do both aspects of medicine get along, but there are newer technologies and there's a new focus and acceptance for people to do these things, including taking weight loss drugs, not just the acceptance of getting a facelift or hair transplant or filler and Botox. So since I came out with that book over the last 5 years, I've really been progressing, talking to my patients about these type of things, offering weight loss treatments, things, supplements, things of that nature. I even have another doctor that focuses, who's not a dermatologist. He's a functional medicine doctor who focuses on this. Because, you can't do everything, I think.
Yeah.
One doctor can't do everything.
When your patients are arriving now, Paul, you were talking about marketing earlier, are they asking for it or are they just blindsided? Like, obviously they're coming, let's just pretend typical dermatology patient, they come in for their annual checkup. Are they walking in and then they're saying, hey, do you also do weight loss? Or are they showing up saying, also, I know you're doing a skin check, but I'd love to learn more about the wellness packages you offer. Like, how's that flow going with you being in a dermatology practice right now?
Well, I think the way my practice is set up, it's marketed, the way it's marketed, its digital footprint online, and the way we present ourselves is that when people come to PFrankMD, even if they're removing a mole or they're getting a body check, they know we're a aesthetic healthcare organization.
Yeah.
And given my social media presence, I'm always talking about wellness. I'm always educating about the cutting edge stuff that you're seeing all over the internet. So I think people have a little bit of a preconceived notion. If they do have cosmetic concerns, and we do believe that there are other mechanisms other than like working from the outside, well, then we're certainly going to bring it up to them. Mm-hmm. Or in the least, if it's beyond our expertise, refer them out. Because there are certain things that, like, again, I don't want to have in our wheelhouse. We're not treating true obesity.
Right.
So I think it's a combination. I think providers have to present themselves the way they want to be treated. Just like we do on a personal level. You know what I'm saying?
I want to kind of expand on that too, and expand on some stuff you've talked about. So there's this, one of the things you said that makes a lot of sense is you got to work from the inside out. If you're kind of this complementary idea of looking good and feeling good. And then there's also kind of where Brad was asking the question, this idea that you're going to meet you have to try to meet a patient where they are. They show up and they're at some point. And I'd love just to hear a little more about kind of how y'all approach, where to start with somebody, if they're coming in asking for aesthetics, but you think they need something more wellness related.
Well, I think it's like what you said. It's meeting them where they are. It's first about making people feel comfortable about wanting to better themselves, because it's not just about wrinkles or a sagging neck. People are uncomfortable having extra weight. They're uncomfortable with the fact they may drink too much. They're uncomfortable with the fact that they're tired and middle-aged and they just don't feel like the best version of themselves. So you have to desensitize them a little bit. To me, that's the fun in it. It's to make people feel comfortable about not only doing cosmetic procedures, but just about overall wanting to better themselves. I think dermatology is such a great field of medicine to address these issues, because so much of the things that are medical are also cosmetic, and things that are cosmetic are also medical, like acne. No one's dying from acne. Some people would be like, oh, that's kind of just cosmetic, but I don't know. It's a true inflammation of the largest organ of your body. It can be caused by PCOS, which takes lifestyle changes and intervention for lifespan. We treat women who have, as part of our wellness program, we treat women who have mild to moderate urinary incontinence after pregnancy. And we use magnetic field stimulation devices to strengthen their pelvic floor muscle. Some would call this medical, some would call this cosmetic or lifestyle. So I think there's so much, overlap. I think dermatologists are used to having these conversations because, again, some things some people consider medical, sometimes people consider it cosmetic.
How do you train them to know, kind of how to approach these very things you're just talking about?
I think every aspect of medicine, including the business aspects of medicine and including the care of it, comes from setting an example. It always comes from the top. And I think on my website, on my social media, I show a passion for it. I think my younger associates, they always want to be a little bit like their mentors, you know what I'm saying? And they pick up things a long way. They create their own spin on things. There are certain providers that are better about talking and performing certain procedures than I do, and I think people find their own niche. But I think it's undeniable now in the field of aesthetic medicine that this integration of health span and longevity, it's here to stay. And I think, you have to be very cautious because it's hyper marketable too. You and I have spoken about this before. It's like the balance of aesthetic medicine. Like, we want growth, we want education, but there's this hyper commoditization that we always have to be wary of. And just the word longevity is a marketing tool, because I'm not sure we don't have any proof that anything makes us live longer. I think we have proof that we have things that make us live better. I think that our health span is better,
So, in your case, you were looking at this 6 or 7 years ago, obviously, because you wrote a book about wellness. For other audience members who are, running practices and they're thinking about, adding a wellness component to their practice, talked about from a business perspective, what should they start thinking about as they add these elements to their medical practice?
Well, I think the first step when you start doing this, and I could take this from my own experience, is first stay within your expertise. You could always make a good living and run a good business on things you know about. Now, if you want to expand your expertise, that takes work, it takes bandwidth, it takes education on your part. In which case, if you're willing to invest that, you can start expanding the type of services you're offering. But I do see a lot of businesses, they start doing a lot of everything and then they make a little of everything, they don't make much.
Yeah.
So I think it starts with seeing what the interest is of your patient population. And that's conversation. That's talking about nutrition. That's talking about supplements. That's showing a knowledge base on your part to your patients. And then you could find out what the interest and demand is. And that could be starting to offer NAD IV drips. It could be starting to use GLPs if you've acquired the appropriate medical responsibility and education to do so. I think the problem is people are quick to jump on a bandwagon for money and they forget about where their real breadwinners are.
Yeah.
I've made this mistake myself. I've gone into things and I'm like, wait a second, this is not that fruitful for my patients or my pocket. I'm going to stick to what I know.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I want to also just, you mentioned and I think it's so important, the importance of, staying in your expertise and the standard of care and wellness. And you actually mentioned this at the very beginning, the discipline of a lot of these treatments is different than a lot of practices training. I mean, it is, a jump to go from, if you're doing aesthetic treatments to, looking at weight loss and what's the appropriate standard of care, et cetera. And so I think I want to kind of jump from there. One of the things that occurred to me is, of course, from our perspective, we're looking at these cutting edge treatments from a compliance perspective. There's a lot of gray zone, but I think there's a gray zone because sometimes the science isn't fully developed yet because it is, more cutting edge type treatments. Talk about how you evaluate, the standard of care and what's appropriate. And, one example is you may have, kind of the science behind, weight loss and these certain treatments, but then there's these offshoots like microdosing and different things like that. I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. Well, this is a risk reward balance that every physician has to make with themselves. And I think one of the important things to do is, as you're educating yourself on the potential of using prescription medicines or procedures that may originally seem out of your ballpark, is to consult with attorneys like you, with colleagues who may have had some experience that are outside of your expertise to get their experience. I think it's very important to have a team and a support system outside of your office to really give you some guidance. Ultimately, it's always going to rely on you. If you're fortunate enough to have been doing something for many years and had success, you want to protect the safety and liability of your practice. And a lot of times it just ain't worth stepping out of bounds. Like, let's say, for example, with the GLPs, I'm not treating true obese people. I'm treating people for applications that relate to dermatologic things. I do a lot of tumescent liposuction in my practice. So, you know, all my patients are within 10% of their ideal body weight to even do it. But everybody wants to lose 3 or 5 pounds also. And I have found, although there are no studies, me and my colleagues have definitely found anecdotally that taking small doses, you can call them microdoses, for 1 to 2 months after, dramatically improve the recovery, the inflammation, and keep people at a idealized weight. So that's a perfect example of how I use it. If I feel someone has a complicated medical or cardiac background, or they're truly 20 to 30 to 40% above their ideal body weight, I'm going to refer to an obesity expert because it gets more complicated. Start small. You know, not every patient has to be a complex patient.
You know, and I think a couple different things you said was interesting. I know we're getting close to time, Michael, but I mean, first off, as someone who, you know, you go to a doctor often, and even a dermatologist, you're there for a issue, and they see you for that issue, and then they move on to the next patient. So what I heard from you is that's not how your team works with your clientele. You're looking at them from an overall perspective, which I think is huge. And then thinking about like the future of wellness, especially in dermatology, where do you see it? If you're looking at your typical dermatology practice, obviously aesthetics came along 15, 20 years ago now, and that became part of dermatology. Where do you think wellness will be in the next 5 years for your typical dermatology practice?
Wow. I think we are at a point in aesthetic and wellness medicine identical to where it was in 2001. I get out, just as Botox and fillers were getting FDA approvals. Like, it is a potential boom. And I think the central part of that is with the peptide industry, which we could talk about for another hour or so. But the key to what I see is currently right now, it's the Wild West, as you know. I do believe in the next 5 years, we are going to be able to harness some data, some regulation, and some true medical experience to see where these things are going, because we know the GLPs are powerful peptides. I know topical peptides have true science. I used them in my own practice. I think that is the future. And I think only time, experience, and a lot of mistakes along the way in the medical community are going to prove how valuable they are. And they will be potentially the new injectables of the future. And I look forward to a time where I could use these things with safety and efficacy on my patients.
I have a bonus question for you, because it's not super connected to wellness, but we're talking about this next 5 years, and I'm curious from your perspective, your view on AI in a practice and its role. Have you all started adopting it? Or
we absolutely have started to adopt AI in our practice. And I think it's a tool like anything else. I have no fear that it's going to replace me. It'll only replace me if I don't learn how to use it. Like a laser or like a device, I think it will make things a lot more efficient. I think it's something that if you don't learn now, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. But like everything else, it's hyper marketed, it's hyper commoditized, it's very overhyped. I'm not relying on it to do my job yet.
Yeah. So excited.
Other than emails.
Yeah. Well, these are exciting times. It's I think being grounded in this continual learning that we've talked so much about is so important.
That's what's great about medicine. You're always a teacher, you're always a student, and the best is always yet to come. I always feel very positive about it, whether it's aesthetic medicine, wellness medicine, or just plain staying healthy.
That's awesome.
Well, and as the audience can probably tell, you have a passion for all of that, so it makes it fun for you not only to be that student and to be the lecturer at the same time.
Yeah.
Well,
great.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Legal 1, 2, 3s with ByrdAdatto. We're grateful for you, and we'll go to break, and we'll come back and have a few legal wrap-ups.
All right. I'm going to go regular smacking. I'll see you later, guys.
Welcome back to the Legal 1, 2, 3s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd. And for those audience members who don't remember, this season we're focusing on the future of wellness. And my gosh, Michael, we had just great conversation with Paul Frank. I mean, a dermatologist that brings so much insight into just dermatology, aesthetics, and now more importantly for this season, wellness. Vertical, and he had some really interesting takeaways on peptides that I thought was something we could dive into. I know we've talked about in other shows, but things are changing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great example of these cutting edge treatments. We've done an entire episode with our partner Sam Pondrum on peptides, but there's a lot of noise out there, and I'll just kind of wrap up with the reminder that it does matter which peptides you're talking about.
Yes.
It matters how you're using the peptides.
Yes.
So, Paul was talking about how he's used them topically for a long time, but there's a lot of question and controversy about, injecting peptides and uncertainty. And then there's a lot of lack of clarity at the federal level on, which list a certain peptide might be on and what is that compliance implication. And then the biggest reminder is that you can't stop the compliance consideration there. There is state laws that are going to, typically the medical board is going to regulate these types of treatments. And so each state has variances on how they would view this use of peptides, depending on, again, how you're using it, which peptides we're talking about, and whether it's possible or possible with some special consents. And so there's, again, to kind of bring it full circle, Paul said you don't want to rush into doing something that is, outside of your expertise without getting the training. You also don't want to rush into adding a service like this without doing your compliance due diligence.
Absolutely. All well said, Michael. Well, audience members, we're back next Wednesday when we continue to learn more about the future of wellness, when our partner, Dr. Jeff Siegel, will join us to discuss the medical board risk when adding wellness to your practice. Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe, make sure to give us a 5-star rating, and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.